Chapter 32. New Year's came. The old shabby and glorious outlived calendar came down. The new one went up. January was a month of storms. It snowed for 3 weeks on end. The thermometer went miles below zero and stayed there. Excuse me. But as Barney and Valancy pointed out to each other, there were no mosquitoes. And the roar and the crackle of their big fire drowned the howls of the north wind. Good Luck and Banjo waxed wat and developed resplendent coats of thick, silky fur. Nip and Tuck had gone, but they'll come back in the spring, promised Barney. There was no monotony. Sometimes they had dramatic little private spats that had never even thought of becoming quarrels. Sometimes Roaring Abel dropped in, for an evening or a whole day, with his old tartan cap and his long red beard coated with snow. He generally brought his fiddle and played for them, to the delight of all except Banjo, who would go temporarily insane and retreat under Valancy's bed. Valancy's bed? Do they not sleep together? They kissed. I assumed this whole time they had been sleeping together. They're married. Are they not? Are they doing 1950s sitcom beds? Interesting. Sometimes Abel and Barney talked while Valancy made candy for them. Sometimes they sat and smoked in silence, a la Tennyson and Carlyle, until the blue castle reeked and Valancy fled to the open. Sometimes they played checkers fiercely and silently the whole night through. Sometimes they ate all the russet apples Abel had bought, while the jolly old clock ticked the delightful minutes away. A plate of apples, an open fire, and a jolly good book whereon to look are a fair substitute for heaven, vowed Barney. Anyone can have the streets of gold. Let's have another whack at Carmen. It was easier now for the Sterlings to believe Valancy of the dead. Not even dim rumors of her having been over at the port came to trouble them, though she and Barney used to skate there occasionally to see a movie and eat hot dogs shamelessly at the corner stand afterwards. Presumably, none of the Sterlings ever thought about her, except Cousin Georgiana, who used to lie awake worrying about poor Doss. Did she have enough to eat? Was that dreadful creature good to her? Was she warm enough at nights? Valancy was quite warm at nights, in fact. She used to wake up and revel silently in the coziness of those winter nights on that little island in the frozen lake. The nights of other winters had been so cold and long. Valancy hated to wake up in them and think about their bleakness and emptiness of the day that had passed, and the bleakness and emptiness of the day that would come. Now she almost counted that night lost, on which she didn't wake up and lie awake for half an hour, just being happy, while Barney's regular breathing went on beside her. Aha! They do share a bed! This was important information, I'm sorry. Girl got some. Everybody? Girl got some. While Barney's regular breathing went on beside her, and through the open door the smoldering brands in the fireplace winked at her in the gloom. It was very nice to feel a little lucky cat jump up on your bed in the darkness and snuggle down at your feet, purring. But Banjo would be sitting dourly by himself out in front of the fire like a brooding demon. At such moments, Banjo was anything but canny, but Valancy loved his uncanniness. The side of the bed had to be right against the window. There was no other place for it in the tiny room. Valancy, lying there, could look out of the window through the big pine boughs that actually touched it, away up Missisquoi, white and lustrous as a pavement of pearl, or dark and terrible in the storm. Sometimes the pine boughs tapped against the panes with friendly signals. Sometimes she heard the little hissing whisper of snow against them right at her side. Some nights the whole outer world seemed given over to the empery of silence. Then came nights when there would be a majestic sweep of wind in the pines. Nights of dead starlight, when it whistled freakishly and joyously around the blue castle. Brooding nights before storm, when it crept along the floor of the lake with a low, wailing cry of boding and and mystery. Valancy wasted many perfectly good sleeping hours in these delightful communionings. But she could sleep as long in the morning as she wanted to. Nobody cared. Barney cooked his own breakfast of bacon and eggs, and then shut himself up in Bluebeard's chamber till supper time. Then they had an evening of reading and talk. They talked about everything in this world, and a good many things in other worlds. They laughed over their own jokes until the Blue Castle re-echoed. "You do laugh beautifully," Barney told her once. "It makes me want to laugh just to hear you laugh. There's a trick about your laugh, as if there were so much more fun back of it that you wouldn't let out. Did you laugh like that before you came to Missatoire Moonlight?" "Well, I never really laughed at all. I used to giggle foolishly when I felt I was expected to, but now the laugh just comes." It struck Valancy more than once that Barney himself laughed a great deal oftener than he used to, and that his laugh had changed. It had become wholesome. She rarely heard the little cynical note in it now. Could a man laugh like that who had crimes on his conscience? Yet Barney must have done something. Valancy had indifferently made up her mind as to what he had done. She concluded that he was a defaulting bank cashier. She had found in one of old Barney's books an old clipping cut from a Montreal paper in which the vanished defaulting cashier was described. The description applied to Barney, as well as to a half-dozen other men Valancy knew, and from some casual remarks he had dropped from time to time, she concluded he knew Montreal rather well. Valancy had figured it all out in the back of her mind. Barney had been in a bank. He was tempted to take some money to speculate with it, meaning, of course, to put it back. He had gotten in deeper and deeper until he found there was nothing for it but flight. It had happened so to scores of men. He had, Valancy was absolutely certain, never meant to do wrong. Of course, the name of the man in the clipping was Bernard Craig. But Valancy had always thought that Snaith was an alias, not that it mattered. Valancy had only one unhappy night that winter. It came in late March, when most of the snow had gone and Nip and Tuck had returned. Barney had gone off in the afternoon for a long woodland tramp, saying he would be back by dark if all went well. Soon after he had gone, it had begun to snow. The wind rose, and presently Missatoire was in the grip of one of the worst storms of the winter. It tore up the lake and struck at the little house. The dark, angry woods on the mainland scowled at Valancy, menace in the toss of their boughs, threats in their windy gloom, terror in the roar of their hearts. The trees on the island crouched in fear. Valancy spent the night huddled on the rug before the fire, her face buried in her hands, when she was not vainly peering from the oriel in a futile effort to see through the furious smoke of wind and snow that had once been blue-dimpled Missatoire. Where was Barney? Lost on the merciless lakes? Sinking exhausted in the drifts of the pathless woods? Valancy died 100 deaths that night, and paid in full for all the happiness of her blue castle. When morning came, the storm broke and cleared. The sun shone gloriously over Missatoire, and at noon, Barney came home. Valancy saw him from the oriel as he came around a wooded point, slender and black against the glistening white world. She did not run to meet him. Something happened to her knees, and she dropped down on Banjo's chair. Luckily, Banjo got out from under in time, his whiskers bristling with indignation. Barney found her there, her head buried in her hands. "Barney, I thought you were dead," she whispered. Barney hooted. "After 2 years of the Klondike, did you think a baby storm like this could get me? I spent the night in that old lumber shanty owned by Muskaka. A bit cold, but snug enough. Little goose, your eyes look like burnt holes in a blanket. Did you sit up here all night worrying over me, an old woodsman?" "Yes," said Valancy. "I couldn't help it. The storm seemed so wild. Anyone might have been lost in it. When I saw you come round the point there, something happened to me. I don't know what. It was if I had died and come back to life. I can't describe it any other way. It's too good. That's the end of the chapter. It's too good. They're too in love. It's too nice. When are they going to rip my heart out? I don't want them to rip my heart out. I just know they're going to. It's inevitable. The heart ripping will happen here soon. Chapter 33. Springtime. Missatoire, black and sullen for a week or two, then flaming in sapphire and turquoise, lilac and rose again, laughing through the oriel, caressing its amethyst islands, rippling under winds soft as silk. Frogs, little green wizards of swamp and pool. Actually, I'll stop there for a moment. Little green wizards of swamp and pool. So frog wizards, chat, we have a documented sighting of a frog wizard from 1910. It is not just a modern invention. Many people think of frogs as wizards. Everything that has happened before and will happen again. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Frogs, little green wizards of swamp and pool, singing everywhere in the long twilights and long into the nights. Islands fairy-like in a green haze. The evanescent beauty of wild young trees and early leaf. Frost-like loveliness of the new foliage of juniper trees. The woods putting on a fashion of spring flowers, dainty, spiritual things, akin to the soul of the wilderness. Red mist on the maples. Willows decked out with glossy silver pussies. I can't imagine what it's supposed to mean there. Okay, so we've already seen pussy. Do I want to Google this? Willow flower. We'll start with willow flower and see how much of a vagina it looks like. Not at all. Not at... Oh! Apparently, willow flowers are just called pussies. That is the proper name for a willow flower. Huh! The more you know. I expect by the end of the day, fan art of a willow tree. Okay. Willows decked out with glossy silver pussies, all the forgotten violets of Missatoire blooming again, lure of April moons. Think of how many thousands of springs have been here on Missatoire, and all of them beautiful, said Valancy. Oh, Barney, look at that wild plum. I must quote from John Foster. There's a passage in one of his books. I've reread it 100 times. He must have written it before a tree just like that. Behold the young wild plum tree, which has adorned herself after immemorial fashion in a wedding veil of fine lace. The fingers of wood pixies must have woven it, for nothing like it ever came from an earthly loom. I vow the tree is conscious of its loveliness. It is bridling before our very eyes, as if beauty were not the most ephemeral thing in the woods, as it is the rarest and most exceeding. For today it is, and tomorrow it is not. Every south wind purring through the boughs will winnow away a shower of slender petals. But what matter? Today it is queen of the wild places, and it is always today in the woods. I'm sure you feel much better since you gotten that out of your system, said Barney heartlessly. Here's a patch of dandelions, said Valancy, unsubdued. Dandelions shouldn't grow in the woods, though. They haven't any sense of the fitness of things at all. They are too cheerful and self-satisfied. They haven't any of the mystery and reserve of the real wood flowers. In short, they've no secrets, said Barney. But wait a bit. The woods will have their own way, even with those oblivious dandelions. In a little while, all that obtrusive yellowness and complacency will be gone, and we'll find here misty, phantom-like globes hovering over those long grasses in full harmony with the traditions of the forest. Why, that almost sounds like John Foster, teased Valancy. What have I done that deserved a slam like that? Barney complained. I tell you, he's John Foster. That's the twist. He's John Foster. It has to be. Has to be. That's what he's doing all day, is he's writing. I've been calling this since like chapter 4 that she would end up marrying John Foster. I need it to come true. One of the earliest signs of spring was the renaissance of Lady Jane. Barney put her on roads that no other car would look at, and they went through deer wood and mud to the axles. They passed several Sterlings, who groaned and reflected that now spring was come, they would encounter that shameless pair everywhere. Valancy, prowling about Deerwood shops, met Uncle Benjamin on the street. But he did not realize until he had gone 2 blocks further on that the girl in the scarlet-collared blanket coat, with cheeks reddened in the sharp April air and the fringe of black hair over laughing, slanted eyes, was Valancy. When he did realize it, Uncle Benjamin was indignant. What business had Valancy to look like a young girl? The way of the transgressor was hard, had to be, spiritual and proper. Yet Valancy's path couldn't be hard. She wouldn't look like that if it were. There was something wrong. It was almost enough to make a man turn modernist. Barney and Valancy clanged on to the port, so that it was dark when they went through Deerwood again. At her own home, Valancy, seized with a sudden impulse, got out, opened the gate, and tiptoed around to the sitting room window. There sat her mother and Cousin Stickles, drearily, grimly knitting, baffling and inhuman as ever. If they had ever looked the least bit lonesome, Valancy would have gone in. But they did not. Valancy would not disturb them for worlds. And that's the end of the chapter. Okay, we're in spring now. I don't know. I like how the author is letting us enjoy Valancy being happy and being married and just having a good life. I feel like that's just to rip my heart out harder. Like, I feel it in the back of my... I'm really happy for her. Really, truly happy for her. But I can feel it in the back of my throat that something's about to go wrong at any moment here. And that's completely intentional on Montgomery's part. I'm sure it is. I'm sure that is completely intentional. She wants me to be feeling that. And Lord, am I.